see everybody tonight. Allegedly, we missed the rapture, so I must have done something wrong. I do apologize. But however, when I was driving back from the gym today, there's a second part to it. Apparently, there's an alien rapture tomorrow. So now, honestly, I am scared out of my mind for this because I've seen documentaries, I've heard the people's things and movies and all these things about what happens when you get on one of these ships. They strip you down and they got these little proby things like to go into certain orifices of the body. However, I've got a great plan how they're going to kick me off the ship. I've been doing I think this might work. I've been doing a lot of sphincter exercises today. So hopefully the probe will not fit and they'll think that I'm worthless and kick me out and bring me back down to here. Yes, ma'am. Hey, it's just, I know it's a lot of information, but if maybe you want to come back down, just practice a few of those. Because I don't know how to do Kegel exercises, so we're just going to do this. Anyways, okay, enough of the jokes. So, anyways, one, I do want to thank everybody for last week allowing me to share a little bit of my side to it. Like I said, it was not about me. It's obviously how things have been going, and we don't need to have hate. Obviously, on the tails of Charlie Kirk. And obviously, the big push on was also the Irma Zarutska that was killed on that train. So I just want to thank everybody. I know there's a lot of people who said thanks for my service and all this. It's not about me in that respect. But thanks for that anyways. I do appreciate it. And I'm hoping maybe someone out there might hear it and just go, you know what? Yeah, I need to lose this concept of hate and look at a person and value life. But okay, so really quick, I'm going to do a really quick 2-minute recap of last week. We did the podcast, and I noticed that Phil had asked me the same question like 3 times, and I gave him the same answer 3 times, and I was like, I think he was driving for something else into a clarity. So I'm just going to break it down super quick and fast for you. The point to it that the chapters of Ezekiel 38 and 39 is the pre and the post part of the rapture, or I'm sorry, I shouldn't say the rapture, the pre part of the tribulation, the after midway through the second half, you would say, of the tribulation. In order to bring that into, that was the Gog Magog. In order to bring that up, I need to give you the timeline, which is the 2 chapters before. So in the simplicity of understanding that, I'm going to break it down without going through everything we did last week, in case you did not read it. But just to put in your head where we're going at, is that basically the Jews, or say Israel, Canaan, whatever, had land. It was theirs. They lost it, all right, from idolatry and all other stuff. Then they got it back, and that brought us up into like the Roman Empire around 70 AD. They lost it again. And then, like we talked about, they get it back, and that was around 1917. They got to go back and land. And that tells us that they're going to lose it again. And like I said, that's going to be the point of the Antichrist is going to return. It's going to kick him out, and that's the point of it being the elect and the grace. And then he's going to return, and they're going to go back to the land. So they had it, they lost it, they had it, now they lost it, then now they have it. So we're at the point before they're going to lose it again, which is the first part in the tribulation, but then they'll get it back. So that was the concept, so you guys understand the timeline and how Gog and Magog plays into this. Now, what I want to do is just go ahead and give you guys, because I made a very broad statement of what Gog and Magog look like. You know, I was like, it's pretty much all of Asia, this whole side. And I also told you we will break this down as we keep going through. It's going to get smaller and it's going to condense. And the point of the teaching also is understand the concept of the word earth, by definition, was region. All right. So this isn't going to be instantaneous, this earth-born war that everything is just going to turn upside down, the third of the earth to this and the fourth of this. No, it's a regional statement by definition to what's being talked about when this war starts, as the second horse comes in, and that's 38, 39. So if you would, Phil, go ahead and throw the map up, and I want to give you guys a visual. So essentially, so you can kind of put this into your head. Now, I didn't make this map, but this is based upon Ezekiel prophecies in the book of Ezekiel. But what I want to do is point out something real easy for you. The part up there that says Rosh would be Magog, all right? So all these colored parts are what we were talking about for Gog and Magog. So the Rosh part, which it says Russia up there, and where it says Turkey, that is what's referred to or is known as would be Magog. And then where you see is, returns that, Gog. Then what you see is Magog and Persia and Cush and Put. That would all be Magog, stretching kind of across, if that makes sense. Okay. Huh? Yeah, exactly. So, huh? Yeah, that would be the Gog piece. That makes sense? That over here would be Magog, and Turkey right there would be part of the Gog piece. All right. Very, very kind of critical to understand. But just wanted to point that out so you guys can get a visual of what it basically looks like. So there is that. So tonight we're going to do Revelation 6, verses 5 and 6. And the reason for this, I would have done this differently, meaning what I was planning on doing, we'd already be going into Daniel that I've talked about. It's based upon my 2,500 hours of studying. It's kind of where the road I went down to understand a lot of this and other things. But when we first started this about a month ago, there was a certain person in here whose name might rhyme with Jolly, asked, what's the deal with the oil and the wine? And I said, we're going to get to that. Obviously, I'm trying to keep things in a kind of a chronological order. But to that point, tonight we're going to answer that question, and it's a very, very valid question. It's actually very, very important to understand. So we're going to go through that, and that's why we're going the direction we're going to hit some of these seals before we jump into Daniel. So in Revelation 6, verses 5 and 6, it says, read through it, when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, come. And I looked, and behold, a black horse. And its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. And I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures, saying, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius, and do not harm the oil and the wine. Okay, so that's the whole verse, or the whole 2 verses anyways. And now we're going to break this down. And some of probably what you guys heard is fairly accurate. It's actually kind of taught fairly well, but it all isn't. So we're going to go back to verse 5, and we're going to break this down. So the word when, we already talked about this. This is not an and. In the Greek was an and when, which meant there was a time element aspect to it. We don't know when that time that something is going to start. So we had the first seal come up, and there was an and when, meaning at some point, after there's a signed treaty, there's a peace deal, at some point there's going to be a war that's going to onset, come in. And then it goes into this one, like, and then, and when, meaning sometime during this war, then this element of what we're going to read here will begin. So it's not where something happens, it stops, and something starts right after it. Everything is a cause and effect, and it's causing the next thing to happen. So when he opened the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, come. All right, so we've talked about this before. This is not being told to John to come. It's talking to what's coming up, would be the black horse and its rider. I mean, obviously, it's the rider. If it was the horse, it'd probably say something like, I heard the third living creature say, or something like that, calling a horse. But he's not calling the horse, he's talking to the rider. It says, I looked, and behold, a black horse. I'm going to stop right there for a second. So many will teach, and it's fairly accurate, it's pretty good. Many will teach this is talking about, because of what the next verse comes up, is talking about, like something have to do with a famine. All right, we know we're in a war. They'll say, oh, the black horse represents famine. And that's actually fairly accurate. Or they'll say it's evil, it's bad, because black is a bad representation, it's something satanic. Kind of give you a plethora list of things. But when they bring in the concept of famine, that's pretty accurate. But what we're going to do tonight, because that gets said, one of the problems that happens is they'll look at it and they'll create an interpretation on what they read, that this is what the black horse represents, the color black. Well, first, the color black in the Greek here is literally just black. So there's nothing crazy about it. But if they're going to make a point of saying that that's what this means, without even needing the context, I said before, you're welcome to go look anywhere in the Bible and say, how do you support that, saying that that has something to do with a famine? Well, I'm going to give the example tonight and show that this color black actually has to do with famine or hunger, okay? So, and where we're going to go into this, there's a couple places in the Bible, so we're not going to study everything, but one of the places we're going to go is going to be in Job, and most people don't understand the story of Job. And for those that don't, give a quick little kind of conceptual understanding how people hear it and understand it. And here is Job, this great righteous dude, right? He's living well, he's got family, he's got animals, he's living a good life. And Satan goes up to God and goes, bro, all right, I bet you I can make him not love you, basically. God's like, nah, no, you can't do that. He goes, let me do with him whatever I want. God's like, okay, but you just can't kill him. So that was essentially the deal. I'm now very much condensing this for people to understand the point, the story of Job. So everybody knows. People have heard. He lost family. His kids died. He was stuck in boils. All of his animals were gone. He was just going into complete destitution and being completely desolate. From up here, this status of people looking up to him, to now he's less than them. And that's where we're going to go to now. So what happens is, what we're going to read here in a second, that it's going to start talking about Moses. Job is going to start discussing and saying, I used to be up here at this status, and now the people look at me pretty much like a street urchin. So the people around, like if you think street urchin or a homeless person, a person that's starving on the streets of drugs. Now, this isn't an idealistic mentality. I'm not dissing those that are down there, but when we do see them, we understand where they are, and they're the lowest point in life you possibly can be, living on the streets, under bridges, eating bugs, doing whatever they have to do. And that's where the people are looking at Job. And this is where Satan has put him down into this position. Now, two things happen during what we're going to read here in chapter 30. It also discusses something else he's afflicted with. So what he starts talking about, and we're going to look at this right here in Job 30, verse 3, and it says, through want and hard hunger, they gnaw the dry ground by night in waste and desolation. He's talking about these so-called street urchins, these people that have nothing. They're completely desolate. And that he's describing them to what he is now being looked at, like I said, by the others. These people are in dire hunger and dire straits. Their bodies are failing them. They have no money. They have nothing. Okay, so it is talking about hunger or their element or aspect of being in a famine. And then as you continue reading on, it'll actually start talking about them in more detail of what they're going through because they have nothing and because of their hunger. And then he makes a statement in Job 30, verse 9, and it says, and now I have become their song. I am a byword to them. So what he's saying here is, here's these people. Now they look at me as being completely destitute and less than who they are. I'm a byword. They actually look at shame on me, right? Because of where he is. And this is all happening because of hunger. He doesn't have food, and that's where it's going to follow out. So he's now less than the least that is starving and is just nothing with the boils. All the things that bad has happened to him. So as it reads through the rest of it, it starts actually talking about him, what he's going through, and actually what his body is going through because of the lack of nutrition and food and everything else. And then he wraps up here in 30, verses 28 through 31. And it says, and this is Job, I go about darkened, but not by the sun. I stand up in the assembly and cry for help. I am a brother of jackals and companions of ostriches. My skin turns black and falls from me, and my bones burn with heat. My lyre is turned to mourning, and my pipe to the voice of those who weep. So as you read through this, you find this black skin thing is because of hunger. He is starved. His body has completely changed. Now, if you go back into earlier in Job, but I don't know exactly which chapter, it'll actually there's a statement that is made in there that God will bring you from starvation and famine. And it's like prophesying essentially to what's happening to him. If you go to Lamentations, I think it's chapter 5, there's another topic in there talking about famine and how people's skin is turning dark and black. So this concept of black, to what is being taught, symbolic understanding of this black horse and to what has happened is an accurate statement. It's a famine, it's starvation, it's the bad things that happen. And obviously this is happening because of, obviously, war is the ultimate thing causing this. So what I'm just saying is you can go back in the Bible and find things and go, okay, that the symbolism on this, yeah, that makes sense. The black does symbolize biblically starvation, that your body actually breaks down. Okay. Further on, it says, and its rider had a pair of scales in his hand. Now, the word scales, this is this first word up here, zygos. All right. This is a Greek word. Now, this is what zygos means. Let me find it on here. I know I wrote it. Oh, there you are. Now, this is obviously in the Koine Greek that we've talked about. It primarily means a yoke used for draft animals. So if you think about a draft animal, and I'm sure you guys seen movies, maybe seen them around, you have the oxes or the bulls or whatever, and they're pulling a plow or whatever, and there's that bar, that wood beam that's going across its back. It yokes them together. So this is talking about that. That is one of the definitions. It's a yoke. It's something that brings them together. And it also, or a pair of scales. Now, this is not the scales that we had talked about earlier where you have two weights on it. Because you remember, that was an axios in the Greek. An axios is where you have two weights, one balances the other, like the scales of justice. We screwed up, our debt is death, but Christ's blood weighed out those scales, and we no longer have to die. This is a different word. This is the zygos. So it means it's the yoke, is a yoke that goes over an animal, or it can also mean a scale, but this is only for weighing things. Now, further it says, metaphorically, it can also refer to a burden, bondage, servitude, or a partnership. The word's root comes from the word zygnumi, which means to join, goes back to the concept of the yoke that joins two things together. So this is zygos. It can either mean a yoke that joins two things together, or it's actually talking about a scale that weighs something. So now you have the two parts of the definition. So then you're going to make sure when you're reading, you can see things in context to why it's important this writer has these. Verse 6, and it says, I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures. Okay, so who is the voice? And now there's there could be any answer of it, and some people can give you the correct answer. So I'm not saying what's taught is wrong, but the point is, where do you find the answer to this? And that I want to make sure that people understand that what we teach and what we're talking about is actually specific, and it's biblically contextual accurate by definition, and where we can find answers, the Bible will answer it. So actually the answer, we've already studied it, but this is in Revelation 4:6. So if you remember when John was brought up into the throne room, let's keep it that way, he looked and he described what he's seen. He's seen the creatures, he's seen the 24 elders, he's seen the throne, he's seen all these things. So this is the verse right here in Revelation 4:6. And before the throne, there was, as it were, a sea of glass. The throne Christ is sitting on, like crystal. And around the throne that Christ is sitting on each side of the throne, are four living creatures full of eyes in front and behind. So who is speaking from the midst of the four living creatures? It's obviously Christ. Pretty easy answer to find, but I want to make sure, I don't want to just tell you it's Christ and not give you the context of where I get the answer from. And just not making something up. Because somebody go, well, how do you know something of the 24 elders that are up there? Because Revelation 4:6 tells us who's actually in the midst of the four living creatures. So it's Christ. And it says after that, and it says, okay, I'm going to reread 6, and I heard what seemed to be a voice in the midst of the four living creatures, which is Christ, saying. Now he goes into a quote, and this is where now it gets a little bit more on the fun side per se. A quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of barley for a denarius. We're going to stop right there. So this is what gets taught, and it's fairly accurate. They're describing something that's an economic problem. That there's an issue with why a famine may or may not exist, which it does, or hunger, if you will. But let's break this down. So the first thing we want to look at is this word quart. Now, the only reason I'm looking at this word quart is not because you need to know the actual specific amount that a quart is. That is this word, a konix. All right. That is actually the Greek word used in here. Now we're going to go look at the definition of konix to make sure that we are sitting contextually correct in everything we're reading. So konix, here's a definition: a dry measure containing 4 katile or 2 sextari, which is less than our quart. So you're thinking, oh yeah, big deal. I just want to point out, quart is actually just a little bit less than our quart, or the konix, I'm sorry, is just a little bit less. But it's the definition it's talking about. It says a dry measure. So now we go back up to the word zygos, and it's talking about a scale. So right now we know this, what kind of scale we're talking about. That's actually talking about weighing something. So that word zygos in context is saying, okay, now I know we're talking about a scale because it's a dry measure. We'll go ahead and keep calling it a quart, but they have to measure the weight of that wheat and that barley by a scale. So that's why this part of the reason why the writer has a scale. Now, yeah, so why you have the scale. So the next part to look at is where it says denarius. So if you, I think it's denarius, right? Yeah, denarius. If you don't know what denarius is, it's a coin, it's payment. So generally speaking, well, generally back then, a denarius was considered a day's wages. Okay, so what it's telling us is that a quart now, this right now, 1 quart is a full day's wages. Or you can get, and 3 quarts of barley are a full day's wage. Well, that doesn't mean a whole lot unless you've got something to compare it to. So if you go back and look during the Roman Empire, the Roman Empire, all right, so wheat at that time, based upon the cost of a denarius, you could get about 10 quarts of wheat. Now it varied because you have inflations, or you have what is it, supply and demand. It could change, it can vary, bad weather causes it to go up and down, but it averaged about 10 quarts of wheat for 1 denarius. And you could get 30 quarts of barley for 1 denarius. Now, to understand, a lot of people kind of think that this is only talking about wheat and it's only talking about barley. But the problem is this is actually, it's symbolic still, because if that was the case, at this time, like, oh, just wheat and barley suck on the price? Well, I'm just going to go ahead and eat meat. I don't have to worry about it. No, it's an economic problem that's going on that pretty much economically, goods and purchases you're buying is suggesting or saying it's about 10 times more than would normally be. So you can put that in today's milk. If you're buying it, say, for $3 a gallon, and now it's going to be $30 a gallon. Same with gas, $3 a gallon, now it's $30 a gallon. You want to buy $6 a pound hamburger, well, now it's going to be 60 bucks. So if you want to put in that kind of framework that what's happening, this economic problem, and because people can't afford the food, and it's all foods and all economy across the board, symbolically, people are going to starve, right? So this does come back to the concept of a famine that's going across. There's something bad happening that's causing starvation. People are probably going to starve to death. Now, and that is what is taught, and that's I know most people say that, and that's good. That's accurate. It makes sense. But now it's the next part. This is the part that I was so politely asked, what about this? So we're going to look into this part of the oil and wine. And the last part of 6 says, and do not harm the oil and the wine. Okay. So when I first was getting into this, I'm looking at this and I'm like, I've heard the other teachings, and they say don't harm the oil and the wine. And one of the things that gets taught is because this is what rich people have, meaning it's just the poor folk that are going to be suffering through all this, and the rich people are going to be doing fine. So they're showing that they're trying to demonstrate that, oh, the rich people are always going to be good, and it's the poor people. This is not a social economic problem that's happening right now. This is a war. So they're not out of it. And the other problem with that belief in that concept, that's not even true. Oil and wine were both could be cheap commodities. Everybody could have oil and wine. It wasn't just for the rich, right? Because it was a staple in their diets and who they were. And even to the point, if you look at the Jews, they were the misfits of the Roman Empire. But olive oil is obviously really important into the belief, and they always had it, and they always had wine. So the concept of trying to think it's a rich versus poorer class thing and selling that, I'm telling you right now, is a bunch of crap. So, and here's the other thing. So this word eleon, right here, the third word, to make sure, because there's different types of oil. So let's be fair. And when I had read this, when I was kind of figuring out in my head, it's like, well, hold on. If this is a future thing, could this be talking about oil, like crude oil? Especially if, well, the map was, it's kind of like that area of the world is like, could this be crude oil? Well, so I had to go and okay, well, let's go look at what eleon is. And here's the definition to eleon, I'm sorry. It's a neutered noun, which means it is not a feminine or a masculine word. It's generic. meaning, ready? Olive oil. That is the word for olive oil, all right? And it's used throughout the New Testament. So anytime you see olive oil, as long as they transliterate it, Craig, this was the original word. So they may just say oil, but if it comes from the right word, and generally, I'm going to say almost every time that I can think of, it's talking about olive oil. That's the whole point. But it is olive oil. So I'm like, okay, this isn't crude oil. And then we were in Baghdad, back when the war started back in 90, and we're blowing up and burning all the things. So this has nothing to do with the oil. That's not the wrong kind of oil. This is actually talking about oil and wine by definition. So I was like, this still doesn't make sense, because I'm like, okay, how do you harm, using the word, how do you harm oil and wine? I mean, let's just use the oil for a second. Olive oil, probably most people have it in their house. And it's like, you cook something. What do? You put it in a hot pan. Well, wouldn't that, by definition, you're harming it? Okay, and then you put it in bread, maybe. You're going to use bread in it, and you're going to cook it. And that's harming it. And then you're going to cut it with a knife to get your piece of bread. Still harming it. And then you're going to put it in your mouth and you're going to chew on it. I'm thinking this is kind of harmful. And then you're going to swallow. It's going to go into your stomach, and your stomach acid just destroy it. And then you're going to go find some place to get rid of it in the sewage. Like, that seems like harm. So how can this be? How do you harm it? Do you smear it on a wall and punch it? So this was actually driving me nuts. Like, this doesn't make no sense. How do you harm oil and wine? What is the definition of this? What does it mean? Well, there's another teaching out there, and this isn't popular. It's popular amongst a certain individuals that have this belief that Jesus Christ came already in 70 AD. All right. So how they explain this, how they explain this is that there was and this actually kind of got me on the right road, essentially, although it was wrong. But they explain it as like, well, because there was an emperor that back in the day, during the Roman Empire, had made an order to cut down, and they generally say, they go both ways, but they generally say cut down the olive trees. But it wasn't olive trees, it was actually the grapevines and vineyards, all right? So that this bad emperor, this is what it's talking about, this was, that they're saying this happened because remember, they're thinking everything's already done, that is an emperor who did this. And I'm like, okay, so what now you're suggesting is that because it's a tree or it's a vineyard, all right, now what you're suggesting is that it's harming it because you are cutting down or killing something that's a living thing that God created. I'm like, okay, I kind of see where you're kind of getting this harm part, but then I'm like, hold on a second. If it says do not harm the oil and the wine, and this is coming from Jesus Christ, he's actually making a law. He's saying, do not do this. Well, then I have a problem. Okay, then if we're not allowed to harm trees and grapevines because they're a living thing, then does that also mean that every time I cut my grass, I am committing some sort of violation to God because I'm killing a living thing or chop down a tree or pull weeds? And hold on, what about Jesus? Wasn't he a carpenter? Didn't he like chop down trees and cut up wood and all the things? And didn't the disciples go across the Sea of Galilee in a boat during a storm that was made out of wood? And Christ went out there. But I don't remember anything biblically that suggests that he got mad at them and said, you're suffering this storm because you're in a wood boat that my father said you cannot harm because it's made of wood. No. So I know I'm being kind of facetious, but I'm like, hold on, this still is not making sense in my head. And not only that, here's the problem with that teaching. It is accurate. There was an emperor who called for the destruction of approximately 50% of all the vineyards that make wine. This happened in Italy and in all the provinces. And this was done by Domitian in 94 AD. So 24 years after Christ apparently already came. So, and they take the assumption that the Bible, Revelation, is kind of this thing that was written, but it's more of a historical account to what happened. Well, if it's a historical account of something that happened, and it happened before Christ, then how the heck did Domitian do it in 94 AD, 24 years after you make this claim? I'm not right here on the point of picking on them. My point is, it doesn't make sense. And here's the other thing. So yeah, Domitian was a bad dude. This dude was persecuting Christians left and right. Seriously, seriously bad. We've talked about this. But his reason for doing it wasn't anything mean, because they were suffering a famine at the time. All right. They had plenty of wine. And Italy is known to have a lot of vineyards, a lot of great fertile land. So his thing was, hey, get rid of these. Don't make any more vineyards. Start growing like things like wheat, barley, and grain, so we can make bread and have food for the people that are starving. We have enough wine. We don't have enough food. So even though the dude's a bad guy in terms of the persecution of Christians, he made a smart executive decision over Rome to save lives. So this wasn't an evil thing that he did against Christians that is suggested by some. So I'm like, okay, so it can't be either of these. So what is this actually talking about? So, all right, so here comes the fun part. Now we're going to break this down so you understand. Now, I'm going to give you actually what it says in the Greek. This isn't actually transliterated correctly to the English, and I'll just say go figure. So, actually what it says, and here's the Greek words: kai, to, eleion, kai, ton, oion, me, atekesis. What this is in English, I'm giving the exact order it's written in. It is, and to oil and the wine, not you injure. So you not injure. You do not injure those things. Now, I'm saying this and it's like, it kind of sounds the same. It does, but there's a point to this. But the big point to this is this word atekesis right here. All right? It's a very important word to understand. And I'm going to be honest, when I first got this, I'm still looking at the concept of what it said. I missed something in this. I'm going to explain this to you here in a little bit. But so atekesis comes from the word, the base verb is atekeo. So it's pretty much that word. It's just like a K-E-O at the end of it. All right? And it meaning to do wrong, act unjustly, or injure. So yeah, okay, if you want to spin the term of the word being hurt or harm, okay, makes sense. And then the last part of the SES on there, this is just a grammatical ending, indicates a singular person, singular form, used when addressing one person as you. So the horse, the rider comes out, and the address is, don't you do this, to the oil and the wine. And then the last part says, and this part is what got me on the right path. I'm like, oh, wow. If you don't think words have meaning, this is not the right place to be. The beauty of looking at the definition of things in the Koine Greek really open your eyes up. And so the word atekesis appears in the New Testament in phrases that warn against harming others or God. Not trees, not bushes, not things. It's only about against harming others or God. So that told me, hold on, this has nothing to do with the actual physical olive oil. This has nothing to do with your wine, your Dom Perignon. I don't know, is Dom Perignon a wine? It doesn't matter. Your wine. This is talking about people. By definition, an atekesis, all right, is talking about people or God. You do not harm them. That is what it's talked about. It's like, oh, okay. So who are these people that you're suggesting, or what this is saying? Now, I'm guessing you probably already kind of like starting to see this in your head, things we studied, but we're going to go ahead and we're going to go down. We're going to break both of them down, the oil and the wine. We're going to pull something from the Old Testament and the New Testament for each one, And the reason why I'm doing for each one is going to make sense when we close this out tonight and you understand. So here it is. So we're going to first start in Isaiah. This is going to be chapter 5, 1 through 7. Now, this is going to be talking about the vineyard, the grapes, the vineyards, the wine part. There you go. That's the word I was looking for. Vineyard, the wine parts. So let's go ahead and read this. Chapter 5, verse 1. Let me sing for my beloved God, my love song concerning his vineyard, Israel. My beloved has a vineyard on a fertile hill, Jerusalem. He dug it and cleared it of stone and planted it with choice vines. He built a watchtower, a temple in the midst of it, and he hewed out a wine vat, an altar in it, and he looked for it to yield grapes, faithful Israelites, but it yielded wild grapes, idolatrous Israelites. And now, O inhabitants of Jerusalem and men of Judah, Israelites, judge between me and my vineyard. What more was there to do for my vineyard that I have not done it? When I looked for it to yield grapes, the fruit that makes wine, why did it yield wild grapes? And now I will tell you what I will do to my vineyard. I will remove its hedge, and it shall be devoured, and I will break down its walls, and it shall be trampled down. So real quick, the little last part of that thing there is actually something's going to be re-quoted again in Revelation. Just give you guys a heads up. There's a little bit of a prophecy going on this. All right, so right here we're seeing Old Testament. It's talking about Israel. Israel is the fruits. There's good fruits and there's bad fruits. All right, and these fruits are what makes wine and or oil. John. Now we're going to go to John, New Testament, 15, 1 through 6. And again, they're still on the whole grape wine thing. I am the true vine, this is Christ, and my Father is the vine dresser. Every branch in me that does not bear fruit, the grape, he takes away. And every branch that does not bear fruit, he prunes, that it may bear more fruit. Already you are clean because of the word that I have spoken to you. Abide in me, and I in you. As a branch cannot bear fruit by itself, unless it abides in the vine. Neither can you, unless you abide in me. I am the vine, you are the branches. Whoever abides in me, and I in him, it is that bears much fruit. From apart from me, you can do nothing. If anyone does not abide in me, he is thrown away like a branch and withers, and the branches are gathered, thrown into the fire, and burned. Kind of restatement there at the end. Okay, so we're talking about the vineyard. We're talking about the wine. And here is the context, understanding, is the who. Where does the wine come from? It comes from the grape. Symbolically, obviously, you don't actually going to grow on the end of a vineyard. You're going to get plucked off. So here, the first part is talking about Israel. The second part is talking about believers. All right? So now let's go ahead and do a quick jump over to Jeremiah. Now we're going to go into the olive side to it. All right? The olive oil side to it. So in Jeremiah 11, 9 through 16, and again, the Lord said to me, a conspiracy exists among the men of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, Israel. Now, 9 through 13, this is only setting, so you guys have the context to what we're really looking at is 14 through 16. So I know the first part is the context. Verse 10, and they have turned back to the iniquities of their forefathers, who's that? The Israelites, who refused to hear my words. They have gone after other gods to serve them. The house of Israel and the house of Judah have broken my covenant that I made with their fathers. Therefore, thus says the Lord, behold, I am bringing disaster upon them that they cannot escape. Though they cry to me, I will not listen to them. Then the cities of Judah and the inhabitants of Jerusalem, Israelites, will go and cry to the gods to whom they make offerings. They who? The Israelites. But they, the gods, could not save them, the Israelites, in the time of their trouble. For your gods, Israelites, when you're worshiping, have become as many as your cities, O Judah, and many of the streets of Jerusalem are the altars you have set up to shame, altars to make offerings to Baal. Baal is a pagan god that was being worshipped, and this is a big story, big understanding, especially when you're back there when they're in Canaan. Now, verse 14, therefore, do not pray for this, the Israelite people, or lift up or cry a prayer on their behalf, Israel behalf. For I will not listen when they, Israel, call to me in the time of their trouble, the Israelites' trouble. What right has my beloved Israel in my house when she has done many vile deeds? Can even sacrificial flesh avert your doom? Can you then exult? The Lord once called you a green olive tree, beautiful with good fruit. But with the roar of a great tempest, he will set fire to it, and its branches will be consumed. There's that again. So here we are on the olive part of it, the fruit part of it. We're talking about Israel. They're the fruit. Now, the next one here is just a couple of verses. We already did this one, and we were learning about what the truth behind the concept of the elect is, and the grafting in of the Gentiles, so the elect, the Jews versus the Gentiles. This is just 11, 17 through 19. It says, but as some of the branches, we're talking about olive trees, were broken off, and you, although a wild olive shoot, were grafted in among the others and now share the nourishing root of the olive tree, talking about the Gentiles. Do not be arrogant toward the branches, the Israelites. If you are, remember it is not you who support the root, but it is the root that supports you. Then you will say, branches were broken off so that I might be grafted in. Okay, so what we got to take a look at here is we got to see what the fruit is. We know where olive oil comes from. We know where wine comes from. And we know by definition of atechesis that it has to be talking about a people. It's not talking about a thing. So how do you get, how symbolically do you get oil and wine to be a person? Well, you go back into the Bible, and what is the Bible telling us? And what it's telling us is you have two things. You have the Jews, Israelites, that are believers, that are on the branches, they produce good fruit, are going to produce the oil. So therefore, there's a Jewish side to it. And then on the other side, you have the Gentile side to it, the good ones and the bad ones. So they're producing good fruit. And they both work together in conjunction. What I'm saying, I hope that makes sense. So they both represent people, oil and wine, but in two separate planes, because you have the Jew and you have the Gentile. And we're going to get back to this in just a second. That's why I did an Old Testament and New Testament. So when I read that, I'm like, okay, that is really cool. Now I'm kind of getting the thing. It says, do not harm them. Do not harm the oil and the wine. So it's talking about the people. Now here is another kind of a cool point to it. Remember the word zygos, all right? And why I'm bringing up the point of the Jew versus the Gentiles. The second thing it said it was, or the first thing it said was primarily a yoke, something in a partnership. So now you have a people that were separate from God, and what he is now talking about, do not harm, well, this war is going on, but he's putting out, do not harm the oil and the wine, which should be Jews and Gentiles that are now believers and professors of Jesus Christ. They are now yoked together as one, as a body of believers. So that is the warning, or that is what is being told not to do. Now, here's this last piece to this. About ready to wrap this up. When I read this and I got this, like, oh man, this is really cool. I get it now. All right. So don't kill the body of believers, people who believe in Jesus Christ. Makes perfect sense. And now I'm going through the Bible, and I get to another point, and I'm like, this seems like it contradicts. And anybody's ever heard me talk, if something contradicts itself, I lose my mind. I got to go back and figure out why it contradicts. I just don't keep driving forward. So, and here's where I thought I was seeing a contradiction. We'll get this finished up. So if you remember, we were talking about the 24 elders and where they came from. And remember, as we broke down the names, came down all the way down who the 24 elders are, and they were barley. Barley was within their names. And we know that barley is a first fruit, as a high priest would offer up for a first fruit. But we also know that there was the concept that Jesus has been called the first fruit. But as I discussed, and we kind of got the concept, by the law, in order for Jesus to be the first fruit, he had to be offered up by a priest. A high priest had to offer up Christ. So that's when we got up and we understood the elect. Well, we understand the chosen now. And Caiaphas, the high priest of the Jews, is the one that had him crucified. It wasn't Rome. And I know you guys should remember us talking about this. So by a high priest by law offering up Christ, he is now the first fruit. Now, when he is crucified, I'm going through this thing a little bit. Crucified, an earthquake happens, the tombs opened up. We already discussed all this. Some tombs opened up, and that was it at that point. And then when Christ resurrected from the tomb, the men of saints, the saints came out of the tombs and were shown to many around Jerusalem. So now these are the 24 elders that Christ is now, as we learned from Revelation 1 of the better covenant, he is now the high priest. So because he is the high priest, everything that gets offered up as the first fruit has to go through him. So now that he resurrects, the next ones come up. Okay, first fruits, the barley, because there are 3 festivals of first fruit. There was the barley, I told you. There was the wheat, and then there was the fruit first harvest. All right, and then like I told you back then, and we're going to get here pretty soon, that the 24 elders are the barley harvest of the first fruit harvests. But I told you there was 3, and this is the part people they look over. And I said that was number 1. And I told you number 3 was what we see as being the rapture. When the dead in Christ will rise first, they get risen up. That is the fruit harvest, as Christ offering them up now as well. And then I said there was one more, if you remember. Talked about, when we'll see, this is the wheat harvest. But we're about ready to get here pretty quick, was the martyred saints who are going to get lifted up during the tribulation. So when I got to this point, I'm like, hold on a second, I got a problem. If Christ said, I'm just going to use what's normally in here, do not harm the oil and wine, he wrote a law, said you can't do this, then how could there be martyred saints? And saints would be those who call him by his name of Jesus Christ and worship who he is. And at the point, we're in this point of this war where Israel is a target between Gog and Magog, and he's telling them, do not do this, then how did it happen? If Christ, who is sovereign, makes that rule, makes that law, how did it happen? He's making a left and right limit. I'm like, okay, this is contradicting itself, because how can you have Christ being sovereign saying do not, but then over you flip over here, it's like it happened. Isn't Christ sovereign? Isn't he all powerful and his law is law? It is. So I came back over here and I'm like, what the heck? This is not making sense. And of course that freaked me out, because now I'm going back to chapter or verse 6 in chapter 6 and going, man, I'm not going to figure this out, and I got to probably restudy everything to get where I was, because I have to make sure everything works together. So I came back and I'm looking at the words. I'm like, okay, so this is atechesis. It's just telling me, where was it? That it's not to do wrong, to act unjustly, to injure. It's talking to a single thing of you, an entity. And then I looked at the last part, and it's like the word atechesis appears in the New Testament in phrases that warn against harming others or God. Warn. So when you're reading this, it says do not harm. That's a poor transliteration. It's actually you should not harm the oil and the wine. Christ did not put out a thing that says you do not. He said you should not. And if you remember, we were reading in Ezekiel 38 last week. What did we learn toward the end? There was prophecy, and he says, I will vindicate those who hurt my people during this war. And the vindication comes when he returns, and his people will see what he will do to them. So this is talking about that. The war is on. Got war. You got famine going on, but you are not to. You should not hurt these. If you hurt my people, the ones that profess my name of Jesus Christ in this region, for if you do, I will have a vindication. I'm coming against you. Well, as you'll see, they're going to get hurt. They're going to get killed. And you got to kind of think here, I'm just going to put this in the back here. I was going to do this like a game tonight, but I'm not going to do a game tonight. It'll take too much time. But I just want you to put it into your head. So when you're thinking about the regions up here, that this is not a world thing, could you see, or could you suggest, or could you somehow imagine that somewhere in all of this, there might be within these regions a people who might have a definitive desire to go into Israel to kill Jews and target people who profess the name of Jesus Christ? I'm going to let you kind of figure that one out yourself, because I made a lot of big statements. And like I said, we're going to learn to take this from the big picture, kind of condensing it down a little bit. We'll get to Daniel, break it down, and then we get back to Revelation. I'm telling you, we'll actually see countries involved in this. But I will not tell you those. The Bible needs to answer that. But long story. I'm going to reread Revelation 6, 5-6, not specifically, I said, more in a layman type term. And when the time comes that he opens the third seal, I heard the third living creature say, come. And he's talking. I looked, and he told the black horse and its rider. And the rider had a pair of scales that are representing the red scales, weights, and a yoke of two things being joined together. And I heard what seemed to be a voice, which was Jesus Christ amongst the four living creatures. And he said, a quart of wheat for a denarius, and 3 quarts of onyx quarts for barley for a denarius. So you're going to weigh those. So he's going to weigh these. And this is going to be our famine. But then he says, and do not harm the oil and wine. You should not harm the oil and the wine. You should not hurt those in this region that profess my name, because they are yoked together, the Jew and the Gentile that know my name. So I hope for the lady whose name rhymes with jolly, I hope this answers that question and brings a lot of clarity. And I hope seeing the map, if you want to throw the map up there real quick, well. So if you kind of take a look at this map and understand that it is not the earth, that it is by region, and within the regions, there are nations, and within the nations, there are countries. Look how it looks. Now, so keep that in your head. And the question I asked, is there something around here that may possibly want to cause harm and kill, and be specific to want to kill Jews, and specifically someone who might want to profess the name of Jesus Christ? I'll let you answer that question for yourself. This will get deeper. So I hope you guys have a better understanding. Thanks for coming tonight. I hope to see you next week if we don't get lifted up by aliens. And if anybody comes in here and you get away and you're walking kind of funny, I will not say nothing. Anyways, thanks for showing up tonight, guys. I appreciate it. All right. So any questions, comments?